Hey, before we get into this, if you're new here, hit subscribe and stay until the end, because this one goes places most people never see coming. I'm about to tell you exactly how I watched the same woman betray me twice, and how the second time I made sure it was the last. I still remember the exact second everything shifted. I was standing in the kitchen, Sharon's phone face up on the counter where she'd left it, and the preview notification on the screen said enough. A name I didn't know, a motel name I did, a time set for that coming Thursday. My name is Aaron. I was 25 years old, 6 months married, and reading a text that told me my wife had been scheduling a meeting with another man for at least a week. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. I'd already seen it. I stood there with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand and felt something click off inside me. Not dramatically, not with some wave of grief, just off, like a light switch. When Sharon got home that evening, I was calm. Too calm, probably. I asked her about Thursday. She went pale. Then she cried. Then she said she was lonely, that I was always studying, always working, that the marriage had felt like a roommate situation from the start. She never actually went, she said. It was just messages. Nothing happened. I told her I was glad nothing happened. Then I told her to start looking for a place to stay. While you're listening, share in the comments which country you're watching from, and let's continue. The divorce wasn't messy. We hadn't been married long enough to build much together. She took her things, I kept my focus, and I went back to finishing my architecture degree the way I'd started it, alone, on my own dime, working evenings at a drafting firm to pay for school without asking my family for a cent. I earned that degree. Not because I was the smartest guy in the room, but because I was the one still there at midnight when everyone else went home. By 31, I was managing CAD staff at a mid-sized architectural firm in Nashville, pulling a salary that made the lean years feel like a different lifetime. I dated occasionally, nothing serious. I had learned to be careful with my time, and even more careful with my trust. I was coming out of a bookstore on a Saturday afternoon when I heard my name. Sharon was standing near the entrance, holding a paper bag, looking at me like she'd just run into a long-lost friend at an airport. She said she couldn't believe how well I looked. She said she'd heard I was doing great things. She asked if I had a minute. I had a minute. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the fact that 10 years had passed and she looked genuinely nervous, which was not something I remembered Sharon ever being. We got coffee. She apologized, a real one, the kind that names the specific thing instead of asking forgiveness for a vague mistake. She said she had been immature and selfish, that she'd spent years understanding what she actually lost, and that she wasn't asking for anything except the chance to say it. I let patience beat my judgment. That's the only honest way to say it. We dated for just over a year. She was different, or she played different well enough that I couldn't tell the gap. We got remarried 14 months later, small ceremony near a lake outside Knoxville. A handful of people, nothing elaborate. Sharon worked in a high school cafeteria and helped coach the volleyball team. She made decent money, but nothing close to what I pulled in. I covered the mortgage and the bigger bills without complaint. It seemed fair. She seemed grateful. What I didn't know until much later was that her stepsister Carolyn had watched the whole thing from the outside. Carolyn told me, after everything collapsed, that Sharon had seen my promotion posted on a firm's LinkedIn page and asked a mutual friend to engineer that bookstore run-in. The surprise on her face that Saturday afternoon had been rehearsed. By the time I found that out, I was already in the middle of something much worse. For a while, the second marriage felt solid. We had a routine. We had a home. Sharon seemed genuinely present, and I told myself I'd made the right call giving her another shot. Then Helen entered our lives, and the routine started quietly falling apart. Helen was Sharon's best friend from before I ever knew Sharon existed. 36 years old, 4 kids with 3 different fathers, and an appetite for late nights, open bars, and male attention that she made absolutely no effort to disguise. She was the kind of woman who treated every room like an audition. Her boyfriend Kyle was 38, broad, loudly jealous in public, and, as I eventually learned, privately fine with arrangements that most people would call deal breakers. At first it was 1 dinner a week, then 2. Then Sharon stopped accepting invitations to my firm events unless Helen and Kyle were also invited. When I said something about it, Sharon called me rigid. She said I had a predictable routine and needed to loosen up. I let it go more times than I should have. The clearest early signal came at my firm's summer picnic. Kyle made a comment about Helen that I pushed back on. Nothing dramatic, just a direct observation. He squared up like we were in a parking lot. Coworkers stepped between us. He apologized to me the next morning, but the apology felt like a warning dressed up as manners. Sharon defended him. She said I had started it by judging how they lived. She started skipping our weekend plans and replacing them with group outings where Helen and Kyle were the fixed point and I was the optional add-on. That was the year I started paying attention the way I should have from the start. The letter was 6 pages, handwritten, waiting on the kitchen counter on a Tuesday night when I got home from a late site meeting. Sharon had gone to Helen's. I read all 6 pages standing up. She wrote about travel we hadn't taken, romance she felt had faded, attention she wasn't getting, excitement the marriage no longer gave her. She said she had needs that the life we'd built wasn't meeting. She wanted either a temporary separation or an open marriage, and she made it clear that if I refused both, she would file for divorce. I sat with that letter for 2 days. I'm not proud of what I decided, but I'll tell you the truth. I agreed. Not because I wanted an open marriage, because I was still trying to be rational, still trying to be patient, and still, even then, not ready to be the one who ended it. Sharon drafted a set of rules within 48 hours. Her side was protected. I wasn't to ask who she saw, where she went, or what happened. My side had conditions. I had to provide advance notice before any date. I had to share my location and schedule. I had to make sure she approved of timing so it didn't interfere with our shared obligations. I read those rules and understood clearly what they were. They weren't boundaries. They were surveillance wearing the costume of fairness. Around that time, I started talking more to Carolyn, Sharon's stepsister, 34 years old, someone I'd always gotten along with but never spent much time with. She called me after Sharon told the family about the arrangement. She didn't sugarcoat a single thing. She said Sharon had never deserved me the first time and clearly hadn't changed. Then she paused and admitted she'd been carrying feelings for me for a long time, feelings she'd kept to herself out of loyalty to a stepsister who, by her own account, had never fully returned it. I didn't respond to that right away, but I heard it. Carolyn was easy to talk to in a way that caught me off guard. She was direct without being harsh, honest without making it about herself. Our late-night calls started as check-ins and turned into something longer, something that mattered. Neither of us made a formal decision about it. It just became real, slowly, the way things do when two people stop pretending they don't feel something. I told myself I was operating within the rules Sharon had written, and technically, I was. But I also knew that what was growing between me and Carolyn wasn't just a response to a bad marriage. It was its own thing, and I didn't want to pretend otherwise. About 3 weeks into the open arrangement, Sharon asked to see my phone. I handed it over without hesitation. She scrolled, found nothing she could use, and handed it back with an expression I couldn't read. That night, I picked up her phone while she was in the shower. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I found everything. There was an archived message thread between Sharon and Kyle. The dates went back months before she ever handed me that 6-page letter. The two of them had been meeting long before she proposed any rules or agreements. The open marriage wasn't a response to unhappiness. It was cover, built after the fact, for something that had already been running. I kept reading. Helen appeared in a second thread, acting as coordinator, confirming times, passing messages, covering for Sharon on weekends when Sharon had told me she was running volleyball fundraisers. Buried between the messages were short recordings from those weekends, including one with Helen's voice in the background. There were references to a coastal resort that meant nothing to me until I checked my travel rewards account. A reservation had been made on a date Sharon said she was visiting her mother. The resort was booked using my accumulated points. It was for Kyle's birthday weekend. I didn't say anything that night. I went to bed, stared at the ceiling, and spent the next few days quietly pulling copies of everything I needed. The tracker showed up on a Tuesday. I found it tucked under the rear wheel well when I was checking my tire pressure. A small magnetic GPS unit, the kind you can order online for $40. I knew exactly who put it there. Per Sharon's own written rules, I had given her advance notice before going to see Carolyn. I had listed the location, the time, and the reason. A friend's townhouse, dinner, evening plans. I followed every condition she'd written down. and she had still mounted a tracker on my car and followed me across town. I was inside Carolyn's place when the door came open. Sharon hadn't knocked. She went directly at Carolyn, called her disloyal, called her a traitor, said family didn't fall under the open marriage terms we had agreed to. She turned on me next and called me unfaithful, which took a particular kind of nerve given what was sitting on my phone. I let her finish. Then I opened my phone, pulled up the archived threads, the resort booking confirmation in my name, and one of the recordings that had Helen's voice in the background during a weekend Sharon had called a fundraiser. Sharon stopped mid-sentence. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She stood there for a few seconds, then said she wanted a divorce and walked out of Carolyn's townhouse without another word. 3 days later, she was back, crying, asking me not to let the whole thing go public. She said her family would be devastated. She asked me to protect the image of the marriage, to let people think it had simply run its course. I told her I would handle it my way. I got on the phone with the resort, canceled the reservation under my account, and had every point returned. Then I pulled up Sharon's text thread with Helen, specifically the message where Sharon had called Helen disposable once Kyle was secured, and forwarded it to Helen directly. I didn't add a message. I didn't need to. Helen called Sharon the same night. I don't know exactly what was said, but Carolyn told me later that Helen sent her screenshots of the confrontation, the kind where every ugly thing Sharon had written about her was laid out and answered line by line. Helen was furious, in a way that only someone who has finally seen the truth can be. Kyle apparently did what men like Kyle do when the arrangement stops being comfortable. He disappeared before our house even went on the market. No dramatic exit, no confrontation, just gone. Sharon cycled through her responses over the following 2 weeks. One day she was threatening legal action, claiming I had violated her privacy by accessing her phone. The next she was apologizing in long voicemails, saying she had made the worst mistakes of her life. Then came the promises, that she could change, that therapy would fix everything, that the version of her I had first fallen for at that lake in Tennessee was still in there somewhere. I let her say all of it, and then I told her clearly that I would never be her husband again. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I had finally stopped being afraid of the ending. We sold the house. It moved faster than either of us expected. We split the proceeds without hiring attorneys to fight over percentages, divided what was in the house room by room without theatrics, and signed the closing paperwork on a Thursday morning in a title company office while it rained outside. The divorce became final soon after. Carolyn and I kept seeing each other quietly for a few months after that. I want to be honest about what that was. It was real, but it had started in the middle of damage, and we were both smart enough to recognize that. We ended it the way it had gone the whole time, calmly, with respect, without bitterness. We still talk occasionally. There's no bad feeling there. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a newer building on the east side of Nashville. Clean lines, good light, no history. I blocked Sharon on everything the same week I moved in. Her letter, all 6 pages of it, I kept. I put it in a folder in my filing cabinet. Not to punish myself with it, not as some kind of wound to press on. I kept it because it is the clearest record of the moment I finally chose myself over the idea of keeping something together that had never actually been repaired. That letter is proof that when it mattered, I paid attention and I moved. I was not the man she planned to leave me as. That part I made sure of myself. Was I wrong to stay quiet and gather proof before confronting her? Or would you have done it differently? Drop your answer in the comments, and if this hit home, like and subscribe.